Hello and welcome back to The Drag Detective. Here today in this video, we are going to solve the mystery of, does age really matter on Drag Race? Is there a difference between how well older queens do versus how younger queens do? I have compiled all of the numbers. I have filled up an entire Google Sheet with all of this tea, and I think I've sort of come to a conclusion, but we're going to break down a lot of different facts and fun things that I found out along the way. But before we get into that, make sure you are following me on my Instagram and my Twitter, where I'm always giving my hot takes. I'm asking you guys for your opinions on stuff and much more. And if you are able, make sure to subscribe to my Patreon. It's a great way to support the channel. For as little as $1 a month, you can get early access to videos, and there's a lot of awesome stuff we have on our patron Discord. So go check that out if you are able. Now, I thought this was kind of a fun concept, and one of my patrons, Matt, actually brought this to me and kind of posed the question, and I was like, you know what, I have heard people discuss whether younger queens get maybe pushed more by production because they're more in line with the age of the people watching Drag Race. So I decided to go through each season and map out how well each queen placed for each age. So like I have all the 21-year-olds here, how they placed 22 all the way up to 52, which is our oldest contestant. And also there are a couple factors here that I really can't do anything about that might skew the data, such as the fact that not every age has the same amount of contestants competing at that age. And I also did not include any international seasons in this just because there aren't maybe enough seasons to really understand how those different franchises work based on age. So I just did American Drag Race, and I did not include All-Stars in this. I just did the first 13 seasons to see how they did. First, let's look quickly at the youngest person to ever compete on Drag Race. That is technically Tatiana, who lied about her age and said she was 21, which is the youngest you are able to compete. But she was actually 20 at the time. I did end up including her under the 21 category, though, because as far as the producers were aware, that's how old she was, and that's how they treated her as a competitor. So she's listed under 21, but really she was 20. And then our oldest is actually good old Charlie Hides, who was 52. What age has had the most queens compete while they were that old? We have both 25 and 26 as the two ages with the most queens. It's kind of in between. They're not super young, like 21, but they're also not like 40. So I feel like they're a good age where I feel like maybe the younger viewers and the older viewers can still kind of relate to them. So it's kind of that sweet spot, and it makes sense why there would be so many queens that old competing. Some other ages that have a lot, 28, 29, and then we sort of taper off. And that was one of the things that I really struggled with when I was doing this data, is that there simply just aren't a lot of older queens to look at the data for. Of queens over the age of 40, so 41 and above, there are only 5. So when you compare that to, let's say, the queens in their 20s, there's going to be so much more data to compile from that than there are with the queens in their 40s and 50s. So automatically, some of this data just isn't going to be as accurate as I hoped that it would. Another factor is that there's not the same amount of queens competing on each season. So Victoria Porkchop Parker got 9th place on season 1, but she was the first boot. Whereas you have like Aja getting 9th place on season 9, but they were like, I think the 6th or 7th person to go home. So there's, like I said, factors that I really just can't help. I just did what I could with the data that is before me. So the first thing that I did was take the mean placement for each age. So I just added up all of the placement numbers, divided them by the amount of queens that were that age. You know, mean, median, mode, range, that shit from math. You know when they say you need that for the real world? This is what they meant. So then I took the mean of those numbers. So the mean of those numbers was 6.93. That was the average of the average placement. So by looking at that, we can then look at each individual age and figure out which ones seem to do better overall. And it seems like the sweet spot is 21 and 32. I'm not sure why 32. It seems kind of like a random number to me, and maybe it's just like an anomaly. But the 21 I think makes sense. Like I said, I do think that they're pushing younger queens on seasons because a lot of their audience is either 21 or younger. So that's the kind of queen that they're going to relate to the most. And if we look at the queens who have been 21, there have been 2 winners. There have been 2 more that made it to the finale, another 2 that made it to the top 5. There's actually been only 2 queens that were 21 that didn't do very well, and that is LaShawn Beyond and Serena Chacha. Now let's look at 32. We have less data to go off of here. There were 9 queens who were 21. There are only 7 queens that were 32, but all of them but one did extremely well. Honey Davenport is the only queen to not crack the top 6. And then we have 1 winner, Jada Essence Hall, and 1 runner-up, Brooklyn Heights. And what's just kind of funny is that there are 3 queens who got 5th place and were all 32. Katya, Derek Barry, and Alexis Michelle. Another thing I wanted to look at here was how has casting changed over the years? Especially on shows like Big Brother and Survivor. As the years go on, they tend to cast younger and younger. And I was wondering if Drag Race was that way as well, and it doesn't look like it is. The average age over all of the seasons was 28.7. The youngest seasons are actually season 2 and season 8, with 27.6 and 27.2 as their mean age. And then the seasons with the oldest cast are season 7 and season 9, which were 30.1 and 30.4. And everything else is just pretty average. So I was a little bit surprised to see that the casting of older queens hasn't really dwindled or changed at all since the show's inception. So let's look at some of these older queens. Like I said, there are only 5 that are over the age of 40. The first being Darien Lake, and she actually is the one who did the best of these queens. She made top 4. She was 41 at the time. But if you look at the rest of these queens, they all do not make it very far. Mrs. Kasha Davis got 11th place. Tempest du Jour was out first. Tamisha Iman was out 3rd. And Charlie Hides was out 3rd. So overall, it seems like if you're over the age of 40, which it's a shock that you even get casted, I guess, because there's only been 5, you are probably not going to do well unless your name is Darien Lake. So that was interesting, and like I said, it kind of skewed the data because there just aren't that many queens that are older than 40 that I can base any real data off of. But there's actually a decent-ish amount of queens that were right below that 41 and over mark. There are 8 queens who were either 39 or 40, and they tend to do all over the place. A couple went home first or around first with Pork Chop, Penetration, and Vivacious. But we've also had queens who made it to the end or close to the end, like Latrice Royale and Chad Michaels, as well as some that just fell kind of in the middle, Nina West, Tina Burner, and Sugarcane. An age that stuck out to me that seems to be sort of like another anomaly is 37. There have been 7 queens cast that have been 37, and all but 3 made it almost to the end, if not the end. Now, Kelly Mantle and Jasmine Masters went home very early in their seasons. Acid Betty made it, I think, halfway. But then we have Pandora Box, Coco Montrese, Bianca Del Rio, and Peppermint, who all made it super far. Bianca Del Rio won, Peppermint was the runner-up. And that just kind of stuck out to me because it seems like after around 32, it kind of tapers off a little bit. But then we have this like sweet spot, 37, where a lot of queens tend to become big successes on the show. I also thought about the stereotype, or I don't know if that's the word, the assumption that older queens go home first. So I actually looked at how many times the oldest queen on a season went home first. But I also compared that to how many times the oldest queen on a season won, how many times the youngest was out first, and how many times the youngest won. So, how many times was the youngest queen on the season the winner of the season? It's happened twice, Violet Chachki and Aquaria. Now, how many times was the youngest out first? None. It's never happened. How many times has the oldest queen on a season won? It has only happened once, all the way back in season 3 with Raja. She was 36. And how many times was the oldest the first one out? It's happened 3 times. Pork Chop, Penetration, and Tempest du Jour were all the oldest queens on their season, and they were all the first ones to go home. While there is some data that shows that if you're the oldest, you have a higher chance of going home first than if you're the youngest, it's still not like crazy. It's not like, wow, consistently the first queen to go home is the oldest. It's only happened 3 times out of 13 seasons. So, kind of shocked by that. I really thought I was going to go into this video and be like, wow, Drag Race is so ageist against its older queens, but there is just not a ton of data to say that. What I can say is ageist is that they just don't cast older queens in general. I mean, I remember hearing how old Tamisha Iman was on season 13 and being a little shocked because, like, we don't get queens that are, over the age of 45 often at all. Actually, it's only happened 3 times. And so I was kind of really rooting for Tamisha at that point because I'm like, we need some older queen representation. And of course, that didn't go well because they axed her for a storyline. But yeah, I wish we did get to see some of these older queens because no, they might not be doing everything that's trendy like a 21-year-old is, but they are the ones that have been carrying this mantle for so much longer, and without them, we might not have Drag Race right now. I think that we should be seeing all forms of drag on Drag Race, whether that's from cisgender women, whether that's from trans women or trans men. And I think that also includes older queens who are going to be showing stuff that these queens that are 21 are not going to be showing us. Okay, a couple more stats that I thought was interesting. The average age of a winner of Drag Race is 27.5, which is, I think, a little bit younger than I thought it was going to be, but it's kind of right in the middle, I guess, of what kind of age production usually casts. The average age of a runner-up, so I included back in the earlier seasons where there were 2 runners-up, I counted both of them in this, as well as the newer seasons where there's just 1 runner-up. The average age is 28.4. So I guess that does show that the younger queen tends to win in the end against maybe the older person that they're up against in the final 2 or final 3. And just looking at the ages here, the oldest winner that we've had is Bianca Del Rio with Raja right behind her. Bianca was 37, Raja was 36. And then the youngest winners, like I said, were Tyra and Aquaria, who were both 21. Violet was right around there. She was 22 when she won. And then the oldest runner-up was Chad Michaels, who was 40 at the time. Another fun fact, the oldest person to do a split on Drag Race is Latrice Royale. She was over 40 when she did some splits on All Stars 4. And funny thing, there was no one that was 38 who has ever competed on Drag Race. We've had every age from 21 to 41, but there has been no one that was 38. So I guess what I leave you with this video is, yes, the very few queens that are older don't tend to do well on Drag Race. But there are queens all the way up to 39 or 40 that do well, and consistently so. So yes, Drag Race is not casting older queens. So that kind of says everything I needed to say about why I made this video. There just isn't enough data to even make an argument for this case because there are no queens to factor into the data. So I really hope that Drag Race continues to cast queens like Tamisha Iman, who are maybe older, but like she was a fan favorite. She brought something new to the table and something that I think we have been lacking in the casting department for a long time, consistently since season one. So let me leave you with just a couple of fun facts. These are queens who were the same age when they competed on Drag Race, and some of them really like blew my mind. I was like, I never would have thought these two people were the same age. Starting off, TKB, Trinity K. Bonet, on season 6, and Blair St. Clair on season 10 were both 22. India Farah on season 3 and Adore Delano on season 6 were both 23. Jujubee and Valentina were the same age when they competed. So were Tammy Brown and Scarlet Envy. This one really, I don't know why this one was weird to me, but it was. Shangela and Crystal Method, the first time they competed. Also, Nina Flowers and Nina Bonina Brown. And then this one blew my mind. I truly was like, no way. But it is true. Ginger Minj and Miss Fame on season 7 were both the same age. So I'm going to leave you with that. And again, this was just a fun little thing I wanted to try out just to see if some of the claims that I've been hearing in the fandom for a long time had any truth behind them. And we came to the conclusion that, yes, they do. So take this information and I guess do with it what you will. But thank you guys so much for watching. And here are all of the links to my socials. Thank you so much to my patrons. And I will see you in the next one.